Hi, and welcome back to White Noise. Today we're going to be talking about K-horror and, of course, Netflix's recent Squid Game. Skye, do you want to start?
So I realised today we were going to be talking about K-horror, and I used it as an opportunity to not get called out again on this podcast, and I finally watched Parasite.
Finally.
Right? I know it wasn't on the list that we kind of wanted to talk
Mm-hmm.
about, and I know it's not like horror. I know it's definitely into more thriller, but
Mm.
there's a couple of things on our list that are more thriller.
And I'd say Parasite has its sequences, which could fall
Yeah,
into it. Yeah.
definitely. And I mean, it was on Amazon Prime, it was right there, and I was like, I'm finally going to do it. I'm finally going to watch it. And I was really worried because obviously I know so many people love it. And I was like, has it been overhyped? Am I going to come out of it and everyone's going to hate me?
Yeah, verdict.
I've now watched it. I get it. I get it so much. It is genuinely, and I'm not just saying this, one of the best films I have watched in a long time. And I went into it knowing nothing. I didn't know anything about it.
Did you not know anything?
Because sometimes I can crawl under a rock and just disappear. And to be fair, you're probably one of the only people that I speak to that would have told me stuff about it, and you were really good to not bring it up because you kept saying to me, like, don't go into it as blind as you can. I literally went into it completely blind. Like the only thing I knew was like the class parallels and stuff like that, which I expected. It was also one of the reasons I was a bit worried because I've seen films do that before, and it's not that they've not done them well, it's just that it seemed quite obvious.
Yeah, of course.
Whereas this, it's not that it wasn't obvious, but it was just still done in such an entertaining way. That was the biggest thing. It was so entertaining to watch.
Yeah, you can't feel the time going by at all.
The last 20 minutes threw me off a cliff. My God. But
fantastic.
yeah, I knew I didn't want to get called out again for not having watched it, because I think I've ever been called out on this podcast once before. And I said that I wanted to save it for a podcast episode. So I thought, K-horror.
I think because obviously you hadn't watched much K-horror yet, aside from say like Squid Game, which people are debating if it's thriller or horror. I say it definitely falls into horror. I think Parasite was probably a great introduction, just to like Korean cinema in general. Definitely a good jumping off place.
The only thing with it for me was like, and this isn't like a bad thing that's come in, but like I knew that it had horror-ish elements, or at least that's what I'd been led to believe. So I was sat on the edge of my seat waiting for ages, and I tell you what, the bit with the stairs when that guy popped his head up, I actually had to turn it off for a second.
That was the bit that got me too. I think that got loads of people, because as scary as like the actual like more heightened sequences are, they did not get me as much as that one little moment. I think it was like the framing, the composition, like the pacing of it, just everything. It was everything. Was, like, masterful.
And also I expected, I don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect just this little inhuman kind of looking head to pop up, and like from a child's perspective as well, like they really framed that really well. But like I think it also made me think about one of the reasons I love Korean horror so much is also because a lot of like their myths and urban legends and stuff like that. But yeah, I think fantastic film.
I think that's like a brilliant segue to The Wailing, if we're going to go into folklore, mythology, that kind of thing. To give more context, originally this episode we did want to talk about, say, East Asian horror, but we thought that was too general, so we decided to hone in on Korean horror thriller specifically. But to bring that back to mythology, that's part of the reason we want to do East Asian horror, because there was just so much focus on mythology, and I wouldn't even call it monsters, more like spirits, demons.
Korean horror is definitely more like the spiritual, demony kind of realm, and like that stuff genuinely terrifies me.
Me too. And I think it's because it's more focused on say like an entity rather than like a specific person. So I found in like a lot of Korean horror, there are things you can't necessarily fight, not in like the traditional literal sense we would think of. And that's what I loved about The Wailing.
Yeah, there isn't, especially like in The Wailing as an example as well, there isn't that triumph of good over evil.
Yeah, that's true. Less binary, isn't it?
It really is. Unfortunately, though, The Wailing, I read that it was like Ari Aster's like one of favorite films.
Yeah, one of them. Yeah,
I didn't feel it.
Did you not like it?
Personally, I didn't. It took a long time to get to where I think it was trying to go. And I didn't actually get scared up until I think maybe like literally the last scene where the old man started changing into the devil.
You are joking.
get me the way I wanted it to.
No way. See, that film got me so hard, and I think it was because it was the whole idea of like a society being infected. Like everyone around you, but then that's so personal. It's about what scares you, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know if maybe, because obviously I assume you would have watched this a lot sooner than I did. But I only watched it literally like, I think last night. I don't know if it has anything to, I mean, definitely not on the same level, but I don't know if it has anything to do with the fact that, you know, we've now been through a pandemic and we've been terrified of people being sick around us like that, now I watch it and I'm like, that is obviously awful and it is terrifying, but like, I've lived through it. A lot of the time, obviously horror is based in the real life, but like we are still unfortunately living within our own kind of real life horror story. And the parts of it I wanted to scare me, like the spirit side of it and the demon side of it just didn't get there quick enough. But that might have just been me.
I think we might have approached it from different perspectives, because I went into The Wailing fascinated by like the idea of like mistrust, you know, and like perception. That was the bit that really got me about it, and I think that's what gets me about a lot of Korean cinema in general. If we say talk about Park Chan-wook, we'll get more to him later, but like the ideas of like not trusting people and like interpersonal violence, like I am obsessed with, and I think that's why I personally loved The Wailing.
Me too, which is why it surprised me so much that like for anyone who did love this film, I'm sorry, but like I got really bored at points, and I did, and
where
just
did
like
it slouch for you then?
So I give all films slack in the beginning, always, especially stuff like this that I wait for the build up. But what happened is that like I think it got to the scene where like they were performing like the first exorcism kind of ritual, which I hated. And by the reason I mean I hate it is because like I understood why, because it's meant to be overwhelming, but like the noise of it generally did irritate me. So that was definitely a personal thing. But as that was happening, I was like, oh, okay, now I feel like stuff's happening. And I looked and I was like, oh, we must be near the end. But like it was only like an hour in. And at first I was interested because I was like, oh, okay, more's going to come. And then it just felt like it didn't. It was like it was dipping its toe in and it didn't quite get there. The whole idea of obviously the fact that the old man was really the demon in all of it and the woman was innocent. Maybe I just missed it, and maybe on a rewatch I would think differently. But like that kind of storyline is amazing. Like I think it's really cool, but it took until the end for me to really feel that. You know, sometimes you feel like shocked or betrayed when you find out what the actual storyline is. I didn't feel that, and I didn't really feel any connection to the characters either.
Okay, see, I always found like throughout it, the xenophobia was some of the most horrifying aspects. Considering, you know, they cast like a prominent Japanese actor who was in Audition, which is a nice little piece of trivia, but to cast someone that feels alien, especially say to Korean audiences, this character would feel alien because he is a Japanese actor and such, has an accent on his Korean. Unfortunately I couldn't detect that, but I imagine that when you can, it adds to the feeling of an outsider and such. And I think that those kind of things, if you can see them, really must add to it and make it more scary. So I can see why maybe, you know, in South Korea the film did so well, because people could appreciate that. It was
an example of a film that I was like, I don't think that I'm gonna completely feel absorbed in this, because it's not an environment that I would have grown up knowing. Like I even noticed from like the setting and obviously where it was and things like that I only recognized from film.
Got you.
So I didn't feel super connected to it. The one thing I will say though is that the little girl's acting in it was insane. That's the bit that gripped me. Like, anytime she was on the screen, that's the bit that kept me watching it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
I mean, we've not actually described what The Wailing is about, to be honest. But if you've not seen it, it's a 2016 South Korean like a cult thriller horror, not a cult.
Yeah, it's like an urban legend-y kind of thing.
Yeah. So it's about an outsider coming into a rural South Korean town / village around the same time that a family's young daughter seems almost like possessed. So it's all about fear of outsiders, and I would say like disconnection from roots as well, because there's like a lot of reference to people not understanding old rituals and religion and such. You know, they bring in a shaman, an exorcist and all, and they're also like alienated from their own religion and stuff. I found that really interesting. Like that was something as well that we wouldn't understand well, and it would fly past us.
sometimes it's not just like Korean horrors specifically, but like I've noticed it like just some films in general, that like when you go away and you do a little bit of research and you get a bit more for it. I think just for me is because, especially when I was watching it like late-ish at night last night, I was like, oh, I want to be scared, I'm ready to be scared, and it just didn't quite get
it's not
there.
quite
Apart
that
from,
is it?
It's not, and I get that probably wasn't the point, but yeah, unfortunately for me, it just didn't.
It's definitely one of those ones that's like kind of reminds me of The Shining. You know, some people think it's the most terrifying thing they've ever seen, and some people think it's nothing. You know, same with The Exorcist. Well, this is
why it surprised me when I like looked it up and like saw kind of how well it did, and like again the fact that it was like Ari Aster's one of favorite horror films, and I was like, oh really? Like there's obviously stuff that I'm probably missing, but yeah, just for me, it didn't scare me the way I wanted. I wanted to be scared. Yeah. And it's rare as well for me going to horror films only wanting to be scared. I don't know why I had that mindset. Yeah. So well, maybe again that's because
it, like your perception.
Yeah, maybe. Definitely. I was just here for the spooks, and the spooks went there.
so was there one you watched that did do that for you?
I think literally maybe like the next day I watched, so this morning, the next day would be this morning, I watched A Tale of Two Sisters, and I was really interested about this one because I think especially when it comes to horror, I always am really interested when it comes to horror and women. Anyone who's been listening to this podcast for a little while will know that that's no surprise, but again, I'll go into it a bit more. It still felt like it was dipping its toe in and didn't go as far as I wanted, but it did scare me because it had those jump scary kind of elements that like some people think are really cheap. I don't mind them because they're the only kind of things that really scare me, like make me jump. But with that one, I felt like it was very, I don't know if there was, it felt like a lot of it was cut out. Like there were scenes missing. It was kind of all over the place.
A bit jumpy.
Very jumpy.
Do you want to give a brief synopsis of what the film's about?
The synopsis is like literally why I was so interested. So it's about two sisters who have just come out of an institution for, at the time, at the beginning of the film, you don't know exactly why, but they're returning home. Their father's there, he's very distraught. There is a stepmother who is a very stereotypical kind of Disney villain stepmother, and she's not very nice. But on top of that, there's something weird going on in the house. There's like these hauntings and visions being seen, and it just develops from there. And I was really interested as well because initially when I read it, I actually thought it took place in the institution. And I thought that was going to be interesting. It didn't, but I was still all up for like a haunted house kind of situation. But the bit that got me is that it felt like the film couldn't kind of decide if it wanted to be about one of the girls, like obviously her mental health, and the fact that after her mother dying, obviously there's going to be loads of spoilers for people who haven't seen the film, and it but yeah, about her dealing with that, or it was a haunted house, but it was actually both, and that was a really interesting mesh that I didn't expect, and I think it threw me off a bit.
It will do though, won't it? Like I think that's something I find interesting about Korean horror, is it doesn't necessarily follow the template that we're familiar with, because of course it won't. It's a completely different region, isn't it? But is that something that you enjoy or something you don't like about these films?
Well, this one in particular, it threw me off a bit because I also and I don't know if it's because I went into it really weirdly. I don't know why I went into The Wailing wanting to be scared but should have had more of an analytical mind, but I went into A Tale of Two Sisters with an analytical mind but wanting to be weird. But I also thought, like, obviously the whole reveal that one of the sisters was actually dead the whole time, and like I thought it was really obvious that she was, and it wasn't really a big surprise. And then it just got a bit confusing at one point, and again, I don't know if that's me. I saw a review and somebody had said it's a great film if you pay attention to every detail, and I was like, oh okay, maybe
it's definitely a rewatch film, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I think I definitely missed a few things, but it did scare me. Like my god, that scene in the bedroom with like the woman crawling on the floor, oh my god,
like a traditional like ghost story kind of thing, isn't it?
That's why I think I liked it more than The Wailing, because it had
more jam, isn't it?
Yeah, it really, and also again, just something at the end of the bed, worst nightmare. Also very much made me feel like kind of like remind me of sleep paralysis, which is not fun. So like I was literally like holding my breath as it was happening, and it went on for so long, and I was like, that's another thing I really like about some Korean horror when they do it, is that they really know how to hold on to a moment.
Oh, it's brilliant. The pacing and the editing.
Like you'll have this creature at like the end of a hall, and it won't just like zoom towards you. It will come so slowly that you have every moment to run, but you won't.
Kind of gives me like Guillermo del Toro in a way. You know, when you look at the poster, borderline gothic, it just has that like romantic edge to it, which I love. Where it's like not blatantly obvious. It's just in like the little things, which I enjoy, because I think if you're gonna do gothic, you want to hint at it, not make it so blatant that it becomes the main focus. Does that make sense? I think this film does
more
really
of those subtleties.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I think you must have enjoyed this more, because it's got those tiny little hints of that. It's more ghosty.
It's definitely one I think I'm going to rewatch. I don't know if I would rewatch The Wailing. I think unfortunately maybe I ruined it for myself the first time around. But A Tale of Two Sisters I would like to watch again, because also I'm obsessed with the music in it.
It's gorgeous.
It was so pretty. I was just like, I could just listen to the soundtrack.
You'll definitely have to go and watch some things which are very clearly influenced. Like you'll have to watch Goodnight Mommy. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
I think it got suggested. I think it got suggested to me after I finished watching this. Like I had a brief look through like the suggested films that came up afterwards, and I made note of them because I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is my jam. Because to be fair, if you'd asked me like kind of like what specific themes or motifs in Korean horror I loved, I couldn't really say. I will kind of just go into it expecting whatever and then take away from it whatever it gives me. Definitely. But maybe this is more where I need to start putting my energies.
But I mean, like, is it that we just haven't seen many of this kind of area of Korean horror because it doesn't exist, or is it because it's just not gotten big enough yet to be made aware of, you know, for us to be made aware of? Does that make sense? You know, like it's very rare to see a Korean horror film really break through. Like the only one I can really think of is Train to Busan, which is like completely different to Tale of Two Sisters in so many ways. It's more action leaning than slow, isn't it? It's very fast paced. You've got fast zombies. What were your thoughts, Train to Busan?
It's the one I didn't get around to watching.
Oh, yes.
I know. I had to choose. So I unfortunately didn't have like a lot of time to like just sit and prepare and watch films because, you know, work. So I went through like the list of what we wanted to do, and I picked the ones that like really stood out to me. And I had to choose between watching Train to Busan or The Host. And the reason I decided to watch The Host is because The Host is probably the first Korean film in general, but definitely the first Korean horror I ever watched. And I watched it really, really young, and I wanted to revisit it again. And I can't lie, I'm glad I did. I love it just as much as I did the first time I watched it.
But then Bong Joon-ho doesn't miss.
Well, this is just it. Like when I first watched it, I didn't know who Bong Joon-ho was or anything like that. Obviously, Parasite and all that wasn't even out or even conceived at that point, because The Host came out in like what, 2006?
2006, yeah.
And I think a friend of mine had it on DVD, and one day she was just like, oh, do you want to watch this? And I was like, sure. And obviously when it first came on, I was like, oh, it's, you know, terrible CGI kind of monster. But I loved it. I loved the characters and the comedy that was thrown into it. And
it balances like humor with the horror so well.
It really did. And I think
Bong Joon-ho's strength, isn't it? You see it in Parasite too.
Hugely. It made me realize as well, and I feel like you probably would agree with this, that like a lot of Korean horror, the reason it succeeds so well on like an unconscious level is because it's more to do with like, even when it has this crazy monster that doesn't exist, it's more to do with like reality and the characters and how they react in these positions.
Exactly.
And like you relate to them so well. Whereas like, unfortunately, a lot of Western horror is like, it focuses so much on the villain, like this big scary villain, or it focuses on like a really convoluted plot that tries to like trick you into thinking that it had a lot going on, but these characters are like, there's nothing. So like when they die, you feel nothing when they die. You know, you just want them to have this big ending scene that made it worth watching. Whereas with Korean horror, it's more like you get so attached to these characters. Even if they're in it for like a split second.
It's just adding that extra sentence or two here and there just goes so far, doesn't it, to develop. I think it's part of why people loved things like The Walking Dead because it took the time. It's like one of the only examples I can think of in, say, like Western horror where people have genuinely gone attached, and maybe just like zombie stuff in general, because the zombies are like a faceless mass horde. Those kind of films and shows tend to like focus in on the people and the tension between them, and that's what like we're saying Korean horror does. And I love in The Host to see the tension between the family in particular. Like, it's brilliant. And the fact that they're all Bong Joon-ho regular actors as well. Like there's Bae Doona, Song Kang-ho, like everyone in it's brilliant. The guy from Memories of Murder's in there. I love that they're all like the family, and they're all so strong as individuals, and they just bounce off each other so well. Like, their moments are so funny, you forget they're heartbreaking as well. Like the scene where they're crying in the little memorial area, they're like fighting and wrestling,
and then literally like just rolling all over the floor. It's
like it's funny, but it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, but because it just feels so raw and real, because obviously everyone mourns and cries in their own way, but like when you come to like Western horrors and you have a scene like that, it's like super
morose.
Yeah, and like it's hard to feel it, because like you're like, oh, how you would react in that situation, but it's that kind of absolute heartbreaking. So I guess I can only describe it as like maybe like the scene in Midsommar or Hereditary, when like obviously the characters are releasing their emotions, and you're like, oh my god, I literally have chills because I can feel it.
Yeah,
and like the Host managed to do that with like you said, like a bunch of adults rolling around and kicking each other on the floor. You still felt it.
Just show emotion in such a different way. I love it.
And I think with the Host as well, one of the things I really loved, and I think this is more like a Bong Joon-ho thing more than a Korean thing, but the fact that like they showed the monster straight away. there was like no build up. There was no you only see kind of like a Jaws thing. There's no bit, you just saw it and it was like, oh, okay, cool, we're doing this.
Yeah, because it's like, it's not the focus of the film, is it? The true horror is the terror everyone's feeling. I also really like about The Host is how harshly it takes a dig at Americans. Like, that's so brilliant. That's just right at the beginning as well, isn't it? It's fantastic.
Apparently wasn't intentional. Like, it wasn't meant to be like a comment, like an anti-American commentary, which I don't know if I could believe that.
No,
because it made me realize another thing, that like when it comes to kind of East Asian films in general, but like whenever Americans, or even if they tend to throw in like someone from the UK in there, it just suddenly, why is it always so bad?
I think
like it just changes the tone so much, and I don't know if it's because it just takes you out of it, but like, not to like skip ahead a bit, because we will definitely get into it, but like Squid Game as an example,
VIPs,
as soon as the VIPs came in, I was like,
well, that was everyone's biggest criticism. I think it's obviously one fact is that, well, I call them expats. They're not expats, they're immigrants, like Caucasian Western immigrants coming to South Korea. Like, you're gonna have a limited pool of actors, and like, are many of them going to be good out of that number, and like, it's just not a priority to cast like brilliant actors when you randomly say you need one random white person in a scene. Like, who cares? Like, people make such a big deal out of it, and we'll get back to this when we get to Squid Game in like the last bit of the episode.
But
no, I completely agree. It takes you out of it, but I also find it oddly amusing. Like, some people
I was
get
gonna
so
say,
aggravated, but I just kind of find it funny.
I'm not mad about it. I'm not mad about it, because it's like you said, whether it was intentional or not, it does feel very much like a commentary on like when Western cinema takes these East Asian horror films and they Americanize them, they remake them, and they just completely strip away the point and the essence of them. And like, that's why notoriously they're always bad, because they kind of just miss the whole point of them in the first place.
One of the best examples is like the American version of The Grudge, it just kind of like feels so empty. I know that's Japanese, this is like taking a leap, but it just it takes away like, the essence. Like, it's from Japan, and there's so much of Japanese culture like baked into the film, because of course there will be, that's where the story comes from. It's like that just won't translate, and the same happened with the Old Boy remake. Like, it's not, the problem isn't just that you're taking it away from its source country, but it's just like, have you ever, you wouldn't have seen the Old Boy remake, would you? It's word for word, it's devoid of like grittiness.
I've seen some, since I've now watched Old Boy, which we'll get back to in a minute, because Lyanna, what the fuck? Again, when it came up suggested, I looked at like stills and stuff and like a couple of clips, and yeah, you're right, the fact that it doesn't work like that. You can't beat for beat take it and run with it. Like, you can be inspired by it, you can take it and try and mold it more into whatever culture it's being put in, but yeah, it just doesn't tend to work. But yeah, just going back to Old Boy, so I'd never seen it before. I actually knew nothing about it.
Should we give a brief synopsis?
Yeah, first? You go ahead.
Okay, I'll try my best. So Old Boy is the second film in Park Chan-wook's Vengeance trilogy. Brilliant films all round. So it's Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, Old Boy, Lady Vengeance. Old Boy's right in the middle, and I'd say it is the most famous one by miles outside of South Korea. I would also say it's probably Park Chan-wook's most famous film outside of The Handmaiden. They both probably tie. It is brutal. It's essentially about a man that is hidden away for years, and he wants to take revenge when he gets out, and he's looking for his daughter. I don't really want to say much more than that, because if it's not been ruined for you, you should go blind, because it's fucking insane.
I went in blind. I went in so blind. So yeah, if you haven't seen it at this point, skip ahead or maybe come back a bit later.
Yes, that's true. Actually, I just want to say that, like, in this podcast, we kind of say, like, listen if you want, even if you've not watched a film. This is probably one of the rare times I'm going to say, like, if you haven't seen the film, please do not listen.
Fair, yeah, ironically, like when we recorded about The Handmaiden, we were like, do not listen unless you've seen.
Is a genius screenwriter, just going blind.
Definitely. But yeah, I watched it, and I had to just sit with myself for a bit afterwards. I was like,
don't you like, what did I just watch?
Yeah, because it was one of those films where I was watching it and I was like, this is not gonna go where I think it's gonna go, and I'm gonna hate myself for thinking that it went this way and then it went that way, and I hated myself even more. I just didn't expect it.
So the thing with Old Boy, I think it's outrageous in various ways. You've got outrageous in like the explicitness, and this is in different context. So like it's outrageous and explicit in nudity, in language, in violence. So for a lot of people, that's shocking. For some people, it's the acting, because it's just so like no holds barred, isn't it? Like it is just sometimes you're watching it like, what is going on? Just because it's so intense. And then I'd say the final bit is the taboo aspect of the film. That for me was what got me the most. Like violence and all, you can get that in any film, but it just went places. Like, a lot of people are scared to go.
I think it was insane, because it was literally like layer on layer on layer on layer, because even without the taboo, or like you said, the acting, the dialogue, the other scenes that happened, like I thought it was going to be about this guy being locked in a room for 15 years, and that was interesting enough. And then when he got released, I was like,
where's this going?
Okay. And also, I hate to say it, but again, it was funny. Why was it funny?
It's genius. I don't understand how that film balances like surreal scenes, which I love, with like shocking scenes, with comedy, with like social commentary, with like, I just don't understand. Like, it sounds like it should be too many things to fit in one film, but it works. Like, I just can't think of any other film I've ever seen which manages, maybe apart from Parasite, to just mix so much into once, and it just strengthens it.
Yeah. I think it was also like, it was one of those films that at no point did I like, I mean, again, because obviously it being subtitled, I wouldn't really be able to anyway, but it never made me want to like start for a bit and take a break, or like go on my phone or whatever. Like I was hooked from the moment it started.
It's just pushing more and more on you, isn't it? But not in a way where you feel like, I can't do this anymore, like with a lot of, say, like banned films, or like I've forgotten the name, exploitation cinema. It's not like that. It balances them delicately. Like, I think if one thing went slightly the wrong way or got slightly too gratuitous, it wouldn't work. But you do just keep pummeling through, and you're like, what am I going to see next? It's like every 2 minutes there's something else.
I just couldn't. I felt so hollow afterwards, and like I will admit, some of the films that I found the best have left me feeling like that afterwards, because it's like, I don't know how to feel now. Do I recommend this film to other people? What do I do?
That's always something I found about Old Boy. It's like, it's called like one of the best films of all time, and people recommend it to each other. It's like, should we be? Like, yes, I think we should, but it's also like, I think a lot of people forget how like triggering this film can be.
Yeah,
you know, that's why I did specify to you to look up content warning, because I would say that to other people too. Like,
we see, this is the thing, I don't know why I didn't, because usually when it comes to sensitive films like that, I always look up content warnings just to prepare myself, and I didn't. If I had done,
you might not have watched it.
I feel like if maybe we hadn't been recording like an episode on it, maybe I wouldn't have done. I could have gone my life without watching it. I thought I could. But because I knew we were going to be recording, I was like having that kind of purpose to watch it and to talk, because being able to talk about it afterwards, because especially when you watch films like that on your own, and then it's like, what do I do now? I need to, like I need to talk to somebody about this, and I can't. Whereas luckily here I am, I can do this. But it's difficult, because it's one of those films where it's like, I would 100% say to people, like you said, to look at the content warning, but then arguably if you look at the content warning, it doesn't completely ruin the film, because like I said, it does have so much more than like you said, this taboo, but that whole oh my god bit, like at the end,
I wouldn't want to remove that for anyone,
is taken away. So it's difficult. It's kind of like, you've got to go in knowing that, if like I said, if certain certain stuff really does not sit well with you, then 100% look at, like, make sure you go in knowing.
But I would say about this film, it's different to say like more exploitative films, because it feels like things are gone into for a reason, you know, like it's not empty in the way it goes into stuff. It's just mental. So good. And like, this episode is like dipping between horror and thriller. I'd say Old Boy is definitely more on the thriller side for sure, because it's essentially a mystery, isn't it? I think it's one of the most rewarding mystery thrillers I've ever watched. Just getting to that conclusion at the end, I'm like, holy fuck. You know, everyone always thinks of like films like Gone Girl and stuff, but that just doesn't even hold a candle to Old Boy for me.
No, it doesn't. I was literally just going to say, I think Gone Girl is one of the only times I've really felt like that. It was reading the book, because I did read the book before I watched the film, but even then I was like, oh my god. But yeah, that gave me the same feeling, and I think, and it's not the film's fault, it's my own fault, but because I do a lot of the time go into films with like an analytical mind, it takes a special kind of film to be able to catch me off guard. Not that I'm saying I'm like this great sleuth, I'm really not.
You just get used to patterns, don't you?
And I can see stuff, whereas, and especially because of what it was, again, my mind was like, it's not gonna go there, it's not gonna go there. And then it went there. It went there twice. It was horrendous, but it was a great film. The only thing I'd actually ever heard about the film that people always seem to talk about, and it baffles me that this is the bit people talk about, was the octopus scene.
I do find that horrific though.
It is definitely horrific. I thought I was ready for it. I was not ready for it. And then when I actually later found out that it was a real octopus, and it was done like four or five different times.
The thing is, you can tell it is as well, because it just feels so much more grotesque than it ever could in CGI.
I still thought it was fake until I looked it up afterwards.
You?
I did.
Because when I was watching it, I was like, you can't fake that. It just feels too gross and raw.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't know it was real before going into it, because it definitely would have made me feel worse, because in my head I was like, what I try to do with a lot of horror films, I'm like, it's not real, it's fine. That was real, and that was gross.
Isn't it funny for a film that has so much horrific taboo to do with human relationships in it, that the octopus is what stands out for people?
But that's why it shocked me so much, because like, when you told me to read at the content warning, that's actually what I thought you meant, and I was like, oh, it's fine. Well, no, it's not fine, but like, I know it's in there.
But usually the scene I think of, or I think people really probably should be aware of, is when he first gets out, and he meets the girl, and she takes him to nurse him. And he has that little, she's telling him about her dream being lonely and the cockroaches in the subway and in the bathroom. That's horrible. Let's pass that. But like, that whole area of the film, that like 5-10 minutes, I literally cannot stand any more than the ending. I can stand more.
Yeah, I think that whole bit on the train with like Was it a cockroach? I thought it was an ant. I thought it was meant to be an ant.
It's something like that.
Yeah, because it's that she has that whole metaphor about the ants and stuff. Like when it happened, I was like, what?
But she's going into the metaphor. You can tell she's like gearing up for this like monologue, and then it's just like showing this imagery.
I just didn't expect it. It was so weird because this film had like so much that freaks me out, which is why it is definitely a thriller, but I would put it into like a horror category because it was like body horror, these fucked up relationships, like, the brutal
horror, or is it like a surreal thriller?
It's definitely a surreal thriller, if you had to categorize it, but I think just because it has so many of the elements that make up horror for me that I was just like, this is horrific.
Things that are personally horrifying to you. I've also found a lot more women tend to find this film horrifying compared to men who are like, this is sick, like this film's crazy.
But again, I did have moments like that, like the corridor fight scene, for example. Like I had so many mixed feelings about it as I was watching it, because I was like, this is so cool. Then I was like, this has gone on so long, but no, it's still kind of cool. Oh my god, now it's kind of funny. Yeah. There was so many emotions.
I mean, it's like such a film bro movie, but it ascends above a film bro movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Weirdly,
it's definitely one of those things, because like say the film bros latched onto it, they're constantly hyping up some things where I feel like they are not the scenes which deserve to be put on this platform. There are other aspects which I personally would really.
But then again, I wonder if this is why, like, when people talk about how shocking the film is, it's always the octopus scene.
Yeah, that's
because
true.
It is definitely one of the shocking scenes, but like people get their teeth removed. There's
the sister.
There's the whole scene with like the ants coming out of his skin, like
one of the bits that I find really vile is when he's in the elevator and he sees a woman for the first time in years.
Because like you said, there are very film bro moments in it that I was like, oh my god, am I gonna like this? Am I gonna like this? But like it wasn't, unlike a lot of like film bro-y films, it wasn't created to be like that. It just happened to have those moments in. But some of these scenes have already been erased from my memory, obviously, because I forgot about them until now.
It's say like a scene like that. It's like by some people it could be seen as, haha, that's so silly, and by other people it's like, that's horrific, because like I see guys like that around. It's viewed so differently by different audiences. I love it.
It's like what you said about also how like men and women would view it as well, like not always completely 50-50 down the middle.
It's of course it's not as simple as a binary, but you can see how like people who aren't just like cis men are gonna view it differently.
Definitely
very interesting.
But so that was the one out of all of them that really stuck with me, because I was like, oh my goodness.
So is it safe to say that Old Boy was the most shocking one?
I think I think so. I know there's definitely more. I mean, there's even more on our list that we wanted to cover. So like if at any point in the future people would like a part 2, I'm sure we could come back, because I'm definitely going to go away and explore now.
Exactly. We could even do Revenge Trilogy one day. If people wanted it, I would love to deeply dive into it.
I want to watch them. And I mean, especially I hope Old Boy's the worst.
Well, and especially because say like Lady Vengeance, you've got a female protagonist. I think you'll definitely get something from that.
Yeah,
for sure. So maybe one day we'll do that. But what was your favorite out of the films?
Well, it would have to be Parasite, even though it was the one that I didn't go in expecting to talk about. It was like I said, I just wanted to use this episode as an excuse to finally watch it, and it did the same thing to me that The Handmaiden did. It's now like up at the top of like my favorite films list, and I can't wait to watch it again. Like I've already watched The Handmaiden like loads since I first did, because it's gotten to a point now where like I can do that thing where I can put it on and I can do other stuff as well, and then I can come back to it when a scene starts. But it's just, I wish I could watch it for the first time. I guess Parasite, The Handmaiden, and Old Boy are 3 films I wish I could watch for the first time again.
Maybe one time we'll have to do, say, Park Chan-wook ranked, because there was one film I realised earlier today I forgot to put on the list, and you would beat me if you knew.
Oh God.
So Park Chan-wook, who did The Handmaiden and Vengeance Trilogy, he has a film called First. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
You have?
I watched it with my dad. It was on before, and we just like put it on one night, and I was like,
what about the bit where he's like biting her thighs?
Yeah. It was all there.
Oh my god!
I don't know if we watched the full
like,
film.
All these Park Chan-wook films, not knowing they're all Park Chan-wook.
Well, no,
this is kind of great.
I think I don't know if we've said it on a recording before, but I've said that, like, you know, a lot of my introduction to this kind of cinema has been thankfully through you. But there have been times where, like, you know, stuff's been on TV, or I did have another friend who like kind of like really like Korean entertainment in general, so like she would have like these DVDs and we would put one on, and then like as I've gotten older and realized who it was, and I've seen like other films as well, and I'm like, oh yeah. But yeah, Thirst is one of them that I haven't seen from start to finish. It just happened to be on TV one night, and so me and my dad started watching it, and we did turn it off. Well, I was quite young. No, I've never finished it. I've seen it from like...
I can't believe I forgot to add it to the list.
Yeah, I've seen it from maybe like mid-beginning to mid. I really couldn't say, but I just have, you know, like when you watch them, especially when you're younger, and you just have these scenes in your head. Yeah. They're in my head.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so
how far
I would
did you
be...
get?
I couldn't tell you because I didn't
so
even know what the plot was at the time.
Fair.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. And it was also because it was on TV, there were breaks until we were like, okay, this isn't getting any better. We're gonna switch over.
I'm so frustrated I didn't think. It's vampires. Well, you love The Handmaiden.
I think, like you said, we need to come back for a part 2.
Yeah, potentially, especially if you've watched Train to Busan then as well.
Yeah,
there's a lot more Korean horror K-dramas coming out now as well. So like I've got it on my notes. Beyond Evil. Apparently that's really good, and it keeps coming up recommended for me on Netflix. It looks pretty intense. It's like a thriller.
So like I looked at the ones that you had like written down, and unfortunately I haven't seen any of them yet, but one that I'm currently watching at the moment is Sweet Home.
Okay.
And it has like a lot of the stuff that I love about that kind of horror. So like, not like, actually I will admit some of it has actually scared me, but it's not, I don't go into it to be scared, but I really like monster horror. Like it doesn't even have to be done super well.
Is this the one in a building? I think I've seen like the key art. Okay,
yeah, and it's like a mixture of, some of it is CGI, but like a lot of it is also costume, and it's even creepier when it's costume.
Yeah, of course.
And again, it seems that like with like Korean horror, where it's TV or film, do try nowadays to lean in a bit more into like actual costume instead of just CGI, because unfortunately, as great as and like as smooth as CGI is getting, it's still not really looking that much more realistic. So it does take away. But Sweet Home's had me hooked from like the first episode. It is so gory and so bloody, and it's like, it's just, you look at it and you go horror, and I love that. And like,
there's no joking around about what it is just pure
there
horror.
Isn't it's just it's just that people are literally like, they're having like nosebleeds and vomiting up blood, and it's just so in your face. And
I'm probably gonna have to give it a go. I mean, a lot of the stuff we've been talking about today, it blurs that line, doesn't it, between pure horror and thriller. Be nice to try something pure horror.
It's the kind of thing that I imagine would have been suggested to you on Netflix if you had watched Squid Game, because obviously everybody's algorithms on Netflix are going to be a bit flipped at the moment for maybe what they're used to watching.
Is this our entryway to Squid Game?
This is our entryway into Squid Game, and just from the beginning, I'm going to give a shout out to Alice in Borderland, because I know a lot of people are like coming out at the moment saying, why didn't Alice in Borderland get the same coverage that like Squid Game's getting? It's like, that's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes.
And also, let's just be quite frank here, Netflix didn't push Squid Game. It could have been lost to the Netflix dungeon. It's just by pure freak accident, maybe by good word of mouth, some people started watching it, and then as it escalated, Netflix went, wait a minute, and then they pushed it. It's not because of them it did well. They didn't expect it to do well, and now they're kind of like reaping the benefits and acting like they're all great. It's like, fuck you, we know what you've done.
There are so many articles out there at the moment that are like, why has this happened? Because I'm pretty sure Squid Game has like gained Netflix something crazy, like it's like 44 or 4.4 million new users since it started. But it is now the number one Netflix show like globally
of all time.
And I'm like, not to start off by trying to be negative, but like, I don't get it. Like I loved the series. I thought it was really good. I did enjoy it. I do have my critiques, which I'm sure we'll get into in a bit. But like, of all of the ones, I don't understand why it was that
you mentioned
one.
this to me before.
Yeah, it just surprised me because like I get why people liked it, because again it goes back into the idea of like what a lot of Western shows as well as films miss out on is like the characters and the commentary on society that a lot of people can relate to, you know, with like the debt, racism, class, all of it. But like it's not the first to do that, so I was just so surprised that this is the one that did it. And it was also really weird for me because like, not, this isn't me trying to sound gatekeepy, it's not, but I literally watched it the weekend before it blew up, which was so strange because then all of a sudden it was everywhere, and I thought it was going to be another situation where like we've spoken about briefly before, growing up in school, like watching like K-dramas and stuff like that, and people thinking that we're really, no one cared and thought we were strange. I thought we were strange for liking them, and like now it's like everybody loves it.
Yes, but do you know why? It's because no one's thinking of it as a K-drama. They don't want to think they're watching K-dramas. It's being advertised like a Western show. It's not being advertised as a K-drama. And like, I get it, I do, because of the negative connotations. Like, people think of K-drama and they think of romance. They don't think K-drama literally just means Korean drama. It doesn't just mean romance. Like, that's like thinking American film and just thinking action, which like, yeah, fair. But it's you know, it's too broad a term. And I think that's kind of where Netflix has done well. I hate to say it, but that was kind of a brilliant strategy move on their part. And also the success of Parasite in 2020, 2019.
Definitely coming off of that now.
Yeah.
But it's funny you say that as well, just like bringing up kind of like K-dramas in general, and like even looking at like the romance ones, it still surprises me when people like say turn their nose up at them, because what is really the difference between like these K-dramas and then stuff like Riverdale or things like that are like also quite silly and over the top, but like people love that. I love silly and over the top stuff. So
and to
I
be
don't
honest,
understand.
Squid Game is. I don't know why people are acting above it, because Squid Game gets really fucking stupid at some points.
It does, and another reason why I loved it, because it had those elements of like you said, like the comedy and the horror mixed together, which like always works. I feel like it really does. Do you know what surprised me though? That like a load of people went into it not actually knowing that it was like a deadly game kind of situation.
You don't need to tell me. My own sister was like that.
It shocks me.
I think my sister and her partner, they had only watched the first half of episode 1 because they had to have an early night. I was talking to them about it the next day, and they were just like, oh yeah, we're just watching the game, it's crazy, da 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 da. And I just said something like, yeah, I still think it's so sick, like they do actually die, like it's not just like a frat. And they were shocked, because I think they were right at the end of episode 1. You know, no one had they were going into the game being told the rules, and they were, we'll wait.
God, what a place to stop.
Exactly. And I was just like, so when I said that, they were so mad. They were, you've ruined this. And I was like, surely the power of deduction would tell you.
Deduction, and I'm also sure the synopsis says it.
That's what I said. I said all the artwork for the show, all these different things, like the popularity. Surely the popularity of the show would tell you like it's incredibly violent. But I have seen people say they were shocked by just how much like blood and stuff there was in the show. Yeah. Which, to be honest, me too. Because I didn't expect it from a K-drama of all things. Which is ignorant, because like you say, Sweet Home was quite horror-y and gory.
Yeah, but well, to be fair, it that does make sense, because I say with something like Sweet Home, obviously, you know, from that onset, it's going to be like that because it's like horror. But I got my girlfriend to watch Squid Game, and like these kind of things really aren't her thing. Like she's not really into like horror. She'll maybe dip her toe into thriller, which is like fair enough, because it's not for everybody. And she was like, is it going to traumatize me? And I was like, well, I'll just tell you kind of what's in it. I was like, there's a lot of blood. Weirdly, you don't see a lot of like the injuries and the impacts. You just see like you said, it makes up it makes up for it in blood. But the bit that got her was the surgery bit. Like, she really couldn't look at the screen whilst it was happening. It was super gross. But again, I don't know if it's just because I watch so much stuff now that, like, I didn't even think about warning her about that. We just went into it and it started happening and she couldn't even look at the screen, and I felt so bad.
I found personally with Squid Game, like, loads of people talk about the violence, but like that wasn't even what scared me. Like, what scared me more was like how evil people became and the fact they went back. Like, we had this discussion in private outside the podcast. Like, we were debating episode 2. Obviously, it's been much discussed when it comes to pacing and such. I think it helped so much. It really got me into like, oh fuck, they're so desperate. Like, you know, in a lot of Korean media, there is a lot of talk about wealth disparity in South Korea. So obviously I was aware of that, but just like that really cemented it. It was so heartbreaking to see them go back. And it wasn't even like, you know, they go back to the game and then they find out they died. They've literally been in a game where people were killed next to them and they still go back. So I don't know. Quite
and it was so interesting to see as well, the ones that were literally begging for their lives also went back.
Yeah.
And it's just it's difficult because like there are a few people who were like asking me if they should watch it or not, and I was like, in all honesty, I think one of the reasons it's become so popular is probably because it has that like something for everyone element where like if you want to go into it because you just want to watch an interesting show, then it's for you. If you want to go into it and really analyze why it has been set up the way it has, why you had characters like Ali and things like that, then it's also for you. But I had like some backlash from people where they were just like, oh, I just want to enjoy a show, why does everyone have to make it about something? And I was like, it was literally created about something, and I was like, no one's making you watch it like that. It's just I feel like it's so but I feel like it's so unavoidable. Which is why some people were like saying, why does everything have to be something? It's like it's not that everything has to be something,
but
it's
this
just this
is
particular this particular piece of media was.
The amount of people, like, I don't know if it's just me being a bitch, but like it's frustrating me. I was seeing people go, oh my god, did you know this is about wealth? I'm like, no, there's not a giant piggy bank there for no reason. And then the people that are like, oh, I don't want to read into it too much, it's like, mate, pick one or the other. Like, or just no, not pick one or the other. It's not black and white like that, is what I mean. It's in the grey zone, isn't it? It's like you can just watch it and not overly think about that, which would, in my opinion, be a bit weird. Or you know, you just you watch something, enjoy it for what it is, which is a good show, like you say, has a bit of something for everyone, while also consuming these critiques, which are not as subtle as some people are acting like they are.
Yeah, they're really not.
No.
But I think it's because it's like you said, it's not like it was created and then it was thrown out there to be like, make of it what you will. It was created with this
for that reason. The whole show is about wealth and inequality and desperation. Like I don't know. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant show.
I think this is why a lot of people are like split on the ending. Like, I will admit, I personally don't know anybody who like loved the ending. But I think depending on how you watched it, depending on how you felt about it, because my biggest issue with the ending was that it all of a sudden kind of went against that a little bit, and it went from being like everyday hero kind of situation to like action hero with like him being like on the phone and being like, I'm gonna go back, and it's like. Which was also weird because I'm sure there will be a season 2, but apparently it was never made with the intention for there to be a season 2, which I don't understand.
That's what I found very weird about the endings. It felt like a very nice, concise miniseries, and we've discussed this previously. We think a brilliant ending would just be knowing it's going to keep going. Like,
yeah, I think they should have ended it when he saw him again at the train station. Train goes past, black screen.
I completely agree. Yeah, especially because just before that, you see that he's not touched his money either. And before you found out he didn't touch it because he feels guilty, it's up to interpretation. Like, has he got no money because he's not touching his winnings because he feels guilty, or has he just gone back to old habits? Because just because you've gone into that game and you've earned money doesn't mean you wouldn't end up in the same position again.
That's such an interesting view. I didn't think about it like that, but that's actually really interesting.
Well, that's what I assumed. I just thought he was back to square one, and I was like, oh my god, I love that. And then it wasn't that.
Yeah, see, I did read it as like how it was, like it was just that he hadn't touched the money, and the reason I liked that was because it was kind of like, again, it didn't just be like this thing happened and now this next thing's happening. It's like it's moving on with the fact that like he would be traumatized by this, he would have PTSD, he would have survivor's guilt. But thinking about it, actually it also would have been interesting to see him just have I don't know how you could spend that amount of money, but somehow blow it all and just
which
be
could
back
be
to where
because
he
of
is.
trauma. So he's just like, going further into the bad habits. And then, you end it with seeing, Gong Yu King pop up and he's at the platform again. It would just be like, oh my God, this cycle just chews people up and spits them out. Like nothing improves. Like I would have been like, in the heart, like stab. Like that would have been, to me, that's a perfect ending. But Netflix doesn't know how to end shows. They just don't.
That's true. That's unfortunately, where it fell into. Like it's great that because it fell under the Netflix umbrella, it was able to get pushed out the way that it did, but it also
it could be the death of it,
Yeah. I'm just gonna put it out there now. I don't want a season 2.
No, I don't.
I liked it. I don't want a season 2.
It'll be very actiony, won't it? Because how else would it go?
It would, and also it would surprise me so much because, like, unless they went completely down the route of like being like, oh, there's other games in other countries, which again I'm also not a fan of, but it's difficult to create a season 2 when pretty much your entire ensemble cast is dead.
Exactly. I think so it could work really well if you have a completely new and unique and interesting cast of characters who are just as likable and interesting as the first round. So you could just be like, oh, it's not like they were the only important people. There's every year there's people that deserve a chance and stuff. But it would have to take some amazing screenwriting and some amazing casting and acting, and it's just not going to happen.
It would. I mean, the creator has said that if there was going to be a season 2, it would take some time, and if they
also said it'd focus on the staff, didn't he?
Yeah, that is something I would like, because obviously it really implied that these staff are also just everyday Joes that are possibly in debt or whatever, got themselves into a situation they couldn't get out of. So that would be interesting, because like I'm pretty sure it wasn't the intention, but like I like people's theories about stuff when it comes out, and I quite enjoy the theory of when they were playing the game, if he chose, I know it's very Matrix, but when he chose like either the red or the blue card,
but it's fun, isn't it?
I think it would just be interesting to kind of maybe go down a completely different route than following this one main character's story, because he did still fall into the whole thing that, like, I'm pretty sure everybody knew he was going to be fine. Like, he was the main character. At no point did I actually worry. Maybe apart from the last game, I had a bit of a minute.
Well, my sister made a really good point, because she said she knew who the final 3 were going to be. Like, it was so obvious, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And she was like, I just know Sang-woo's going to die because the big bad amongst the group will die. But she said she had a feeling before, obviously she sadly passed away, and that was like a heartbreaking moment. She thought that maybe like Gi-hun would die for Sae-byeok. Like, I wouldn't have been surprised if that was like his big hero moment. Like, they got to the final episode, he killed himself, and then Sae-byeok went off. But that's too optimistic.
To be fair, the whole reason that Sang-woo killed her in the first place was because it was like, yes, okay, because he was meant to be the big bad, and the fact he'd felt like he'd been forced at that point to do what he had to do to survive, but because he knew that they would probably cheat him out of the game. Because I mean, he tried to do it at the end. They was like, if the majority players don't want to play anymore, that's more why he wanted to do it as well, because he was like, I'll fight till the last breath, but you're not cheating me out of this.
Well, because he's already killed and gone through it all. Because
exactly.
Not justifying it, but you see his reasons, don't you? It's awful.
I wonder how he would have been if he had won instead. Like, he definitely would have obviously taken the money and gone back to his life, but it would have been because he knew he killed himself before he went back into it. What I find so
fascinating about Sang-woo is he's going for money, but money won't solve his issues, because at the end of the day, he's still going to go to prison. Nothing's going to change for him. And that's what I found so interesting about a lot of the characters, is their misery is caused by money, but it's not the only problem. It's not just created debt, it's created other problems like prison time, disrupted family relationships, and they all think that the lack of money which has caused these problems will solve those problems. It's like, no, it took that one thing to break them, but it won't fix them, which I thought was fascinating. I wish they'd gone into it a bit more, but I guess it's just the kind of thing you can't overstate.
But this is why, again, me saying I don't know why it blew up and then trying to give theories as to why it blew up, but it's the multi-dimensional characters. Like,
they were the number one reason.
They didn't just have debt, they had lives. And like, whilst I do have my own differences with the second episode. I know why they did it. Like, even before I watched it, my sister had already seen it, and she said to me, she was like, stick with it through the second episode, but you'll understand why they do it. And it was like, I did understand why they did it, but I don't know. I can't theorize a way they could have done it that would have worked anyway, but it did just, again, slow the pacing down a bit.
Well, I think it worked. Like, I've already said a reason why I think it works, but I think it also works in that, you know, they say, oh, everyone's equal and such. I did find it interesting that it was a bit of an equalizer because almost everyone came back. So it's like that fake equality coming back again.
True.
That was a big thing I did quite enjoy about the show, is the constant you're equals here. It's like, no, you're not. One thing I do have to say that has really been like hitting me over the head about this show. So you mentioned you don't like that it's all over the globe. Yeah. So it's a double-edged sword for me, because I like it in that it shows that debt is not just singular to that one country. Like, don't you fucking think it's just South Korea, like it's global. But then at the same time, it's, if this is supposed to be commenting on very specific wealth issues in South Korea, why are you then making it global? Does that make sense? So, they have their very own specific issues, like you know, how, say, minimum requirements to get into jobs are like insane in South Korea now. The debt in South Korea, I think it's like, I can't even remember the number because it was just so astronomical, but it's like
in trillions. It's like something
more
trillion.
Than it's more than the national wealth or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Almost every single household has like a stupid amount of debt. I've found it so bizarre to not go into those things and make it a global game. But at the same time, I get why. I
didn't mind the fact that it was knowingly a global game. My issue came from like, if then they take the series and just do it in, I mean, I know they won't, but if they just did that, because I like, where would you stop? But it's interesting you bring that up, because I was like just reading a story about somebody who was living in Korea, and they were talking about how like they counted themselves lucky because their debt was under 50,000.
That's so scary.
I was just like, fucking hell. But it's true, it brings up a lot of stuff. And this thing I think is bugging me a bit about it, and this is especially when it comes to like UK reporting, and maybe it's the same in America, I don't know, but like I've been looking at mainly the BBC. Like, people's concerns are like, kids are playing the games from Squid Games in school, and it's like, yes, they have been for a while. They are kids' games, and it's like, what are you, this isn't the point.
Like, what are you getting from it?
Like pretty much all of the stories that I've seen have been a bit about that, and also it's creating an issue that actually isn't. I mean, big surprise, the news is creating a false issue, but like it started to report on the issue before it even became an issue. And it was like so the joke of like TikToks going around when people were seeing kids like playing green light, red light, or like tug of war in school, and being like, oh my god, they're playing Squid Game, as a joke.
And then but now the news ran with it.
The news is actually coming out being like, parents are like, I'm going to pull my kid out of school because they're allowing them to do this. And it's like, who let them watch it, first of all?
I completely agree. Like, I doubt they've even watched it. They're just playing games. And because it's been put in this show, they think they've got it from this show. It's just, I don't know.
And also, I'm not saying that kids should watch this show. This isn't what I'm saying at all. However, I can imagine a lot of kids who have watched this show, because they're not going to watch it and think about the crippling debt and the fact that that's why these people are killing each other. They probably are just going to watch it and just be like, we'll just go play this game.
So you mentioned about this individual who said they thought they were lucky because they had less than 50k in debt. So obviously crippling debt is hardly rare in Western countries, far from it. But the idea of like every single person having like insane amounts of debt and still having to go about their day-to-day lives, we don't really talk about that openly here. Whereas in, say, South Korea, maybe it's not openly talked about, but it's a more like known issue. So the idea of people literally fighting to the death in a South Korean show makes a lot more sense. Whereas I think, and it's scary because it's like it could happen, like people are that desperate. Whereas say in Europe, North America and such, I think a lot of people just look at it as this fantasy thing that would never happen in real life. So it takes on such a different meaning. So I think they're seeing it more as like, this is crazy, bro. And less like, oh my god, they're literally fighting to the death for money. Like, I don't know.
I mean, it was even the discourse around Ali's character. The fact that a lot of people were like really pissed off because of how he was being portrayed. But it was like, again, there was a reason why he was being portrayed the way that he was. Mm-hmm. He was a representation of another issue.
Yeah, exactly. Of like undocumented immigrants in South Korea. Mm-hmm. And something that frustrated me was, one, I think we all know the tweet that started that discourse. It was that woman that made assumptions. Mm-hmm. What frustrated me is the pylon she experienced. Like, people were right and saying she should educate herself, but at the same time, a lot of people who are watching that Squid Game, they don't know that, because not everyone's educated on every country in the world. So it's like, yeah, she should have educated herself, but she was just commenting on a trope that is in a lot of media around the globe. So it was like, no one was right in that situation.
I mean, you also bring up another good point of like people piling on when it's kind of like, this is why there's a difference between educating people and then just kind of telling people that they're wrong. Because like you said, I'm pretty sure that that tweet wasn't started out to cause trouble. It was just to comment on an issue. But instead of people kind of being like, okay, this is why it was this, or this is why it was that, it was just people probably, like you said, very uneducated themselves, just seeing what everybody else was saying and being like, you know, you're wrong, this is, and not like really explaining why, or not even saying you're wrong, but just being like, in this situation, this is the way.
There was one fantastic thread that was in response, and it explained everything, like the cultural differences and such, and you know, them honorifics and like levels of formality and addressing people in South Korean culture. Like, it explained that so well without just like absolutely insulting this person like as a person. And I thought that's the way to do it, considering that for like the first time in God knows how long, like everyone around the globe is watching something that, you know, that is so far removed from like the Netflix American norm, become so big so quickly, like on a global scale. Like, not everyone is going to understand all those things straight away, and it's kind of ridiculous to assume they will, and it's only through watching things they'll learn. But I don't know,
I mean, I think this is kind of like weirdly an unconscious reason maybe we wanted to do this episode, because it was like, obviously we are not the most educated in the world either, but I think it's kind of a call to, especially if you are going to go out and enjoy these films, that like there is some research that needs to be done into it to do with culture. Like, one, because you will just find out so many interesting things, but it will also enrich watching these films and TV programs, because you'll understand more. And instead of like going, oh, like, I don't understand why they did this was stupid, you'll be like, oh, okay, so whether you agree with it or not, you know, you can still disagree with it, that's fine, but like, it's hard to disagree from a point that maybe you don't fully understand. So I hope that however you feel about the popularity of Squid Game, that it does encourage people to do that a bit more, and to go out and also to just explore Korean entertainment as a whole a bit more, because as we know, when we were talking about the other films earlier, there are so many gems out there.
Well, and it's definitely I do think it's fantastic to see like the like double deadly combo of like Parasite and Squid Game in years next to each other is making people go out and explore it. Because I mean, I for one, like, I'd only seen a few things, I'm definitely consuming a bit more, and it's really interesting, like you say, to like educate yourself on a different culture, and you know, make sure you're not missing out on things which are actually really important to those pieces of media. I really hope that like we've tried our best in this episode, and that people can get something from it. Obviously we don't know everything, like Skye mentioned, and just through like consuming more media and researching it, like, we can educate ourselves more.
I think at this point we've said everything kind of that we wanted to say, you know, because we are, you know, just two fans, we're not experts, and a lot of like the cultural understanding that I do have has come from like just passive knowledge from what consuming, and I've just like realized that like, oh, okay, this has been done in a few things, that's why it gets done, or also because I love researching stuff, so I will just go out and do it. And I know it's not for everybody, but it does just help. It just help that understanding a bit more.
Yeah, like not being like a passive consumer of like foreign media, but like actively getting engaged. I really hope people enjoyed this episode. I mean, we knew it wasn't going to just be focused on horror, we knew it would go into other stuff. I hope people enjoyed it, and that they'll watch some Korean horror, especially because now it's all getting recommended on Netflix, like Skye mentioned. So I'm definitely going to go and rewatch Parasite, and oh boy, for sure. Just you talking about this made me go,
well, I'm going to go and explore the Revenge trilogy now, because I'm so intrigued.
Yeah, and maybe we'll do an episode on them in the future, who knows.
yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Okay, so I think that's the end of the episode. That's it for tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.